I'll be quite honest with you, I am completely bored of seeing World War II RTS games like Company of Heroes that essentially rely on mass production and speed over tactical calculation and well-implemented defences. As a kid, I absolutely loved playing a game called Soldiers Heroes of World War II. For me, at that time, it was the most difficult and realistic RTS that I had ever played. So, if you're like me and you want to see a greater emphasis on realism, then Men of War 2 from the original developers Best Way is likely going to be of particular interest to you. Before I do jump into this review, I am aware of some political infighting history, which has impacted some players emotionally surrounding the original game. It's not my intention to appease or infuriate in this regard. Please do explain your grievances in the comment section below, I would love to read them. But for this review, I will be merely looking at Men of War 2 from the perspective of it being a standalone title. So Men of War 2 has a wonderfully accurate ballistic lethality. If for example you were to send a mass attack against a well-defended position, even with overwhelming numbers, you will witness a mutilation. Men of War 2 is based off the original game engine, and it retains many of the same positives: decent graphics and audio, realistic ballistics, and a real sense of challenge and difficulty. Even the medium difficulty settings will be difficult for new players. These are all things that I wanted to see in a World War II RTS. When I look through the Steam reviews, I see far too many people complaining about how hard the game is, and I tend not to pay any heed to those kind of reviews because culture shock, war is brutally unfair, and I do want a challenge. That being said, based on my own gameplay testing, the micromanagement requirements highlights 3 significant issues which, until fixed, are going to make this game so frustrating for some players that many will consider it to be almost completely unplayable. Issue number 1. In every RTS game I can think of that I have played over the last 40 years, I have been allowed to select units, then press Ctrl and a number between 1 and 0 on the keyboard and assign them to that number group. Then you can quickly issue commands by pressing the corresponding number once of that selected unit. Or you can press that button twice in order to select them and centralise the camera on them. Now this doesn't currently exist in Men of War 2, and because the game is so realistic, one bullet can kill a man instantly, it hampers the speed at which you can issue commands, so much so that it does start to feel almost unplayable. Sometimes you need to be able to quickly issue commands to units that have run into trouble, and you can't because the UI and the whole interface without that feature is quite clunky. Issue number 2. You cannot currently chain commands. So if I want a unit to hold fire, crouch, sneak up to throw a grenade to destroy an MG position, then run back to cover and repeat the same manoeuvre against a second enemy position, whilst I bring up a secondary set of units in order to eliminate a third enemy, I simply cannot do it. Because I must issue each command to that first chap one at a time. And I'm pretty sure, having tested this a few times, you can't actually make your men run whilst they're crouched either. I do have a suggestion. It would be even better still if we could chain commands and issue a go command to go with it, similar to the game Door Kickers 2. This would effectively allow us to plan, then orchestrate an elaborate and tactically devastating attack against enemy positions in a game which is brutally realistic, and I think that would make for a wonderful game experience. Issue number 3 is their failure to adhere to realism. So one of the things that is great about this RTS is the fact that enemy units do have visual spheres. If they see you, or they see your men, they will react to them. But for some reason, and in this example I'll use the first USA campaign mission, this is the one where we have to recapture a stolen tank, you'll discover that there is a perimeter trigger instead. So even if the enemy never see my men approaching, but as soon as my men get to within a certain distance, the enemy immediately ran and jumped into the tank. Now that in itself is disappointing, but what makes it worse is the fact that there is absolutely no way to open the tank hatch and kill the men inside and then take the tank back myself. I cannot get them out of the tank. So what happens is my men just end up cowering below the machine gun's arc of fire with absolutely zero opportunity to save the mission. Now, in my humble opinion, if just these 3 items were fixed, the game would become an absolute masterpiece. And I say that because there are an awful lot of positives to discuss about this game. Now, it is fair to mention that because of games like Company of Heroes, I really don't much like playing multiplayer. And truth be told, I find watching it to be quite boring too. Unless I am lucky enough to find a like-minded opponent who actually wants to have a chess-like tactical battle instead of just seeing who can amass the biggest army quickest, then I find multiplayer an absolute bore, essentially because it just lacks realism. And yes, I'm well aware of Blitzkrieg, but that's not how it was done. Now, it seems clear to me that Men of War 2 wants to prioritise multiplayer because with every success you get a reward with an MP perk. Because with every success you get rewarded with an MP perk. As most MP players tend to be an arcade style player, it does worry me that this realistic RTS will actually eventually try and make everyone happy, and in doing so will make everyone unhappy. One great suggestion that I saw was to have multiplayer have a 5-minute non-attack period where you can set up your defences before the battle begins. But I saw no reply from the developers on that suggestion, so I doubt we'll get to see it. Furthermore, the game is always online, even in single player mode, and interestingly, because of negative feedback, that is a feature which is now going to be changed. The good news is though that there is a lot of single player content for you to play, and you can play each of the campaign missions with up to 4 people in co-op mode, which to some degree could help with the issues I mentioned at the beginning. Sadly though, there are no British forces in this World War II conflict title. That to me is very much like leaving out the Nazis, because I'm pretty sure Britain did quite a lot in World War II. You've got story mode, historical mode, conquest mode and raid, and each is unique and will appeal to different players in individual ways. I especially like the conquest style gameplay, which includes a procedural battlefield and a tech tree element, and I enjoy also doing the historical campaigns because there is such a great sense of realism there. So let me just reinforce some of these positives, and by giving you an example of the level of realism that you can expect in this game. On one occasion, my anti-tank bazooka guy, who I had positioned to jump out, jumps out from behind the rock he was hiding behind and instantly kills all the men inside of the enemy tank. Now, presumably the driver has slumped over the controls and his corpse is now forcing that tank to do circles. And that's going to continue happening until inertia moves the driver's corpse away from the controls or the tank runs out of fuel. Now that is pretty bloody awesome. Here's another example. My men ran up behind a group of partially in-cover enemy units. They didn't know we were coming, and we outnumbered them, but we have little to no cover. We all die, as you would expect in a realistic RTS. And I have to say that the attention to detail on units is incredible. On some of the grouped units you can issue group commands, but you can also issue commands to individual soldiers. So unlike the majority of RTS games where you can only select the group, in this game you can select one individual soldier, just tell him to hold fire, sneak up and throw a grenade to destroy an MG nest, and then get him to come back to the group who are not holding fire and will defend him against any oncoming attack. It's really very clever and very immersive. I just wish that some of those control elements I mentioned at the beginning were in place so that it was easier to implement these types of things. You might wonder, why is that so cool? It's much easier for one individual to sneak up and take out a multitude of enemy heavy weapons than it is for a group to sneak up and do it, because he's less likely to be spotted. So you can have lots of individual heroes or volunteers, as we see them quite often in World War II movies. In addition to all of this, you can build defences, lay trenches, put mines down, lay anti-tank defences. You can even ride a horse, not that I particularly think that's much of an improvement to the game. I also like how we need to move heavy weapons, and once positioned we can fortify and even camouflage them. These are all wonderful and exciting realism elements, and if you get your defence set up right, the enemy will find it very difficult to break through your defences. In addition to all of that, of course, we have the ability to take control, direct control of any unit on the game. So if you want to be a tank driver, you can be. If you want to be a machine gunner, you can be. It's really extremely awesome, and it's a great feature to have in the game. Now, there are quite a few other smaller issues with the game that I haven't yet mentioned. The UI is pretty horrible, it's clunky, and yes, it gets in the way. So many things are not explained properly in the tutorials, like how to repair vehicles, refueling using a single soldier and a barrel. I still can't figure out how to do that, despite having done the mission multiple times. And then there's the 50-50 AI logic. So most of the time they're okay. Hardly ever are they brilliant, and quite often they are totally stupid. Like one chap who was attacked by my men and we pulled back, and he just holstered his gun and sauntered off back to the base. Presumably his shift was over and he wasn't interested in fighting anymore. Didn't run back to base for cover or alert them or anything like that. Just looked like he was going for a gentle wander in the forest. How nice for him. Sometimes the pathfinding is just ridiculous. An example, when you're trying to get your men to take cover, almost always will put one or two guys on the wrong side of the cover so that they're going to get shot and killed. And on occasions my units just plain ignore my commands, not to mention getting stuck quite often. Sometimes getting units to turn around and face the way you want them to face is an absolute nightmare. And if I put men in a trench and ask them to move down the other end of the trench, for some reason some of them will climb out of the trench in order to run along and jump back in, by which time they're going to get shot and killed. There really is a very good realistic RTS here, just begging for those 3 simple changes to be made in order to totally transform the overall gameplay experience and turn my review into an overwhelmingly recommendation instead of this lukewarm one. It is okay, it could easily be better. You'll find that the explosions and the audio that goes with it and just the fighting and battle scenes that you get yourself into are extremely compelling. I really urge you to have a look at some proper gameplay on this game. I do feel like a lot of the reviews that I've seen are just people shouting, trying to get your attention, and, you know, genuinely their arguments are based on other games, or they don't tend to focus on this game per se. Just what they wanted to see and what is here are not the same, and therefore they think that's a justified argument to downvote this game. I genuinely think this is a good game. 99% of you will probably enjoy it. If they make those 3 changes I mentioned at the beginning, I think even more people than 99% will enjoy it. I think the vast majority of you will enjoy it as it is, although it does take a bit of time to get used to the clunky controls. Once you get used to them though, they're actually very effective. And if they just brought in those first 2 changes that I mentioned, then I think the game would astronomically excel in reviews. Perhaps it's a little bit too expensive, and I don't like the fact that there's no British units in a World War II game. I think that's just disgusting. And yes, I am appalled by the lack of Brits in this World War II RTS. So I would like to see those 4 things fixed, let's say, and then I can give it a massive rosy thumbs up. But yes, even in its current state, it is a good game, and there's a lot of content here. And with the co-op mode, which I haven't been able to try, I think there's even more potential gameplay. It could be such a great game if they had the elements that I've mentioned above, but we'll have to wait and see what the devs do. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, take care. Goodbye for now.